Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. But again, thank you all for coming. I do see some unfamiliar faces. So if you are interested in other webinars like this, our section of NCLA, the STEM librarianship in North Carolina, is always welcoming new members, and we really like to support each other. So this morning, we have with us Denice Lewis, the Research and Instruction Librarian for Engineering and Science at Wake Forest University. And she's going to present about her road to becoming an engineering librarian. And if you'd please hold your questions until the Q&A at the end. I will be moderating those questions and I'll keep track of them in the chat if you want to throw them in there as you think of any. Denice started at the Z. Smith Reynolds Library in March of 2019. She received her BS and MS in electrical engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology, or Georgia Tech, and graduated with her MLIS from Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis in 2019. In between electrical engineering and library science, Denice picked up an associate's in culinary arts from Le Cordon Bleu, Scottsdale. She is a member of the ALA, NCLA, and American Society for Engineering Education. And welcome, Denice, and take it away.
All right, thank you, Megan, for that introduction. I do appreciate it, and thank you, Sarah, for the invite to come and speak. I want to say welcome to everyone. This is a little bit about my life story in terms of my road to becoming an engineering librarian. There are a lot of twists and turns, and I'll try to take you through those in about 30-35 minutes to leave some time for question and answers. So let's go ahead and get started. So just before I can actually jump in, I do need to start just by going over a couple of details in my formative years when I was referred to as Gator, Nisi, or Denice. So the first quote unquote engineering feat was when I was 5. My grandmother had a record player and I wanted to know how it worked. So I proceeded to take it apart. Needless to say, neither my grandmother nor my mother appreciated my inquisitive nature. But actually the first moment or my earliest memory was probably when I was around 9 months and I was trying to figure out how to get from the floor to the bed where my mom was. She was trying to wean me and I refused to be weaned. It turned out I ended up taking out the drawers, climbing up the drawers to get up on top of the bed. But those are my first opportunities for problem solving as well as for figuring out how does something work. Also, when I was young, I always used to say, you know, ABCD stands for avid bibliophile called Denice. I say that my mother was a wicked woman. Some may refer to her as savvy because for each of us, we didn't have the same punishment depending on what we did. Since I love to read to the point where I would check out anywhere from 15 to 20 books at a time. So my punishment growing up was actually getting my library card taken away. So definitely hats off to the Merritt Island Public Library, which was the first place where I went to check out a library book. And I did one time try to circumvent my mom since the librarians knew me by name. You know, and I went up to the librarian and said, you know, if I don't have my library card. And of course, my mom saw me come back with, you know, all the books in my hand. She quickly and politely told me to take the books and put them in the car, drove me back to the library, and proceeded to tell the librarians if I didn't have my library card, then I was on punishment. So that was my first foray and truly my start of my love for libraries. But also when I was younger, just on that engineering side, I always loved math. So I was in math competitions, both in middle school as well as high school. Of course, in some of the competition, the goal was to solve the problem faster than anyone else as accurately as possible. But that started my love of science, was indeed my love of math. So in terms of going from my formative years, so from elementary, middle school, and high school, I actually ended up running to the gentleman that you see in the photo next to me, Dr. George O. Faison. He was my middle school assistant principal at Clear Lake Middle School, who actually was my first and ever mentor. He recognized in me that I had a love for things science and math, and proceeded to encourage me in that. So when I was in ninth grade, I actually started researching what career would be best suited for my interests. So I checked out Peterson's guide, Barron's guide, and at first settled in on computer engineering. And of course, Dr. Faison, since I didn't want to go to FAMU, his alma mater proceeded to steer me toward Georgia Tech. But one of those moments that I can definitely remember, because I actually worked for him after I finished Clear Lake Middle School in the summer as his aide, was figuring out how to still use the whiteout using a typewriter when the brush actually broke apart. So I actually ended up taking a stem from one of the nearby flowers to use to dip in the whiteout and still use it to correct all my typing errors. But he definitely was very influential in terms of not only helping decide where to go to college, and then also to get that first technical experience. My first actual technical job was before I actually went to college. Since I lived in Brevard County, Florida, NASA actually had what they referred to as the SHARP program, which stood for the Summer High School Apprenticeship Research Program, which you could apply to after your 11th grade in high school. So I ended up doing that, and both myself and another friend of mine, Traverse Johnson, had that opportunity for Merritt Island High School. And in this picture, you see me with my manager, Dodie Steele, because my first job at NASA was actually to take different menu programs and transfer them from into another computer system. And it was the beginning of, my technical journey, but not necessarily from a work side, because, way back in middle school, I did take a basic class on a Commodore 64. I don't know how many people are actually in the webinar today that actually remember that. But with that first summer internship experience, I also was able to work for NASA in between graduating high school and heading over to Georgia Tech in a different department. And that's where I worked on, as far as working on different programs in GOAL, which is a specific language for activation on Pad A. And during that, a really fun experience was I actually had an opportunity to actually go inside of one of the shuttles where the astronauts actually sit where the astronauts sat during takeoff. But starting after heading into Georgia Tech was actually my first college experience. And the reason why, it says a rambling wreck from Georgia Tech is that's a part of our actual, our fight song. I'm a rambling wreck from Georgia Tech, a hell of an engineer. I won't sing all of it, just that first part. But at Georgia Tech is where I definitely was able to continue getting that work experience in different ways. So this particular slide just shows some of the different summer internships that I had. And, if you're a budding MLIS student or student in general, I definitely always would recommend getting as much work experience as you can while you're actually obtaining your degree in the form of either a summer internship or a co-op experience. So while I was at Georgia Tech, after my freshman year, I worked at Intel and then proceeded to work with Intel after my sophomore year as well. But one of the things that happened after my freshman year that I wasn't very cognizant of is the fact that for financial aid purposes, they also count, what income you make as an individual in terms of calculating your financial aid. So it was a shock to me to go from my freshman year at Georgia Tech to my sophomore year and have my financial aid cut by about 40%. So, after my sophomore year, I actually ended up applying for every single scholarship I can get my hands on. And that's one of the ways that I got the experience with Kodak, is because of the fact that with the scholarship that I earned from them, you had to do one summer internship. and that was in Rochester, New York. Whereas my Intel experiences were in Chandler, Arizona, basically Phoenix, Arizona, and Rio Rancho. But just to get into some of those experiences in general, I still continued in the sense from a software standpoint, from experience as a test engineer for my summer internships with Intel, still doing a little bit of software development. And in between my bachelor's and my master's in engineering at Georgia Tech, I did have the opportunity to do a summer research program at Georgia Tech itself, working with one of the professors there. So all of my work experience sort of kind of had similar themes, but not necessarily doing the same thing, because I really still didn't really know from a standpoint of what I wanted to do after I earned my degrees, because my original intent was to actually go on to get my PhD, but unfortunately, my father passed away the senior year obtaining my bachelor's, and that's where I really knew that trying to go through school for the PhD definitely wasn't going to be in my best interest. So that's why I ended up after my bachelor's heading out into industry. But just to touch on also some of the work experience, I still proceeded to do a summer internship as well as a co-op when I obtained my master's in electrical engineering at Georgia Tech at Intel in Chandler, Arizona, as well as in Albuquerque, New Mexico there. But still that same vein of, test engineer, software developer, developing those skill sets. Because at the time for my undergrad, my concentrations in electrical engineering were in telecommunications, system control. So mainly a lot of the summer internships had sort of kind of that flavor. But after I graduated from Georgia Tech, that's where I decided, to start working at Intel in Phoenix, Arizona. But when I worked there, I had that feel for, playing in the kitchen, being a kitchen chemist, as well as a foodie. And my love of books always continued. My nephew actually came to stay with me for about 3 months. And hated the fact that one of the projects that I had him do in the house was to put up these different wire bookshelves or bookcases. So they were like different cubes. There was a 6x2 cube as soon as you walked in the front door on the right. And then there was like a 4x3 over in the great room in the kitchen. Then when you walk toward the bedrooms, there was a 6x2 wire arrangement. Not to say that those were the only places I had books, because there was even one of the cabinets in the kitchen I used, for cookbooks. But, in my time at Intel, that's where I worked. My initial job there was as a technical training engineer, basically developing training for technicians and engineers in the fabs or the factory setting. So when we think about a lot of the online teaching that we're doing now, that was some of the things that I was developing back then, what we refer to as computer-based training then. And then also developing a simulation for one particular course that we're developing for technicians, one of the software, automation software applications. But after my time there, that's when I actually went to work as a software application engineer for Fab 12 and 22. Again, went from, training people on how to use the software applications to actually supporting the applications in the factory. So using, that problem solving, engineering mindset, creativity, and finding solutions to different technical issues. But actually, doing a little bit amount of training still as a software application engineer, especially when I took on a special project and did a 6-month assignment in Portland, Oregon. But, working in corporate America, I can truly say that there are moments where burnout is truly real. I'll never forget, there was one day where I went in early in the morning, like at 6 a.m., and then literally worked 20 hours straight. I remember going in, seeing one guard, and coming out, seeing a totally different guard, as the other guard was coming in for his next day's shift. So that actually led me to head to culinary school of all things. going back to that kitchen chemist mindset, because one of the things that I did when I was in Phoenix was to develop a restaurant club where we go and try a different restaurant each week. Scottsdale, Arizona, which is just outside of Phoenix, or you might as well say is part of Phoenix proper, is really like a test bed for different restaurants. So to say that you could literally go almost every week for a very long time to try different restaurants would be an understatement. But that's why I really wanted to try my hand at being a chef. So I went to Scottsdale Culinary Institute, sold my house, moved, got an apartment. So my time there it's really was fun. I can truly say that. So here are two pictures. I have some friends and I in the kitchen, and me presenting, one of the meals that I had actually made. I can truly say that I ate well. And I definitely appreciate the experience for what it was. But, one of the things about when you get your associates in culinary arts is that you do have to do an externship. And it just so happened that I did my externship at Epcot in their catering kitchen, and actually ended up working the Epcot Food and Wine Festival. And this is one thing that I would truly say. If you are a foodie in any way, shape, form, or fashion, you definitely want to go to the Epcot Food and Wine Festival. When I worked there, it was a 2-day experience. Now it's like a 2-month experience and growing. But this is one of the original programs from when I went to the first Epcot Food and Wine Festival. Because not only did I work it, but I actually went to the Party of the Senses, which is on Saturday evenings. And I definitely would recommend that as well. That's my plug for Epcot Food and Wine Festival. But after I got my degree, that's where I decided to work for the Armed Forces Recreation Center at Edelweiss in Garmisch, Germany. But it was a quick foray in culinary from the standpoint that when you work in the food services industry, one of the things that you quickly begin to understand while you're working is the fact that work-life balance is very difficult, because the times that you're working are typically when most families are getting together to eat. So if you're a baker, you're going in at 4 a.m. in the morning and you're coming out at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, if not 3. Or if you're a chef and you're working a dinner shift, you're going into work at 3 or 4 in the afternoon and maybe getting off at 11 or midnight or even later. But one of the things that, really caused me to say, okay, culinary, it's time to go, was me injuring myself in the kitchen and hurting my back at the time. So that's when I moved over from being a chef to being a vacation planning assistant, because I had like a 20-month contract working for the ARFC as a civilian. So, after leaving Germany, finishing my contract with AFRC, that's when I came back stateside and was trying to really figure out, okay, how do I get my feet back into out of, a culinary mindset or back into corporate or another vein. And it just so happened that one of my sisters, a friend of hers, was a dean at that point in time, it was Brevard Community College. Now it's Eastern Florida State College. So that's where, I had my first foray in academia as the COCO Math and Learning Lab coordinator. And essentially what I did there was to manage the math lab on the COCO campus to develop programs to support students with mathematics. So it started off with just 4 walls and just me and 2 tutors. And by the time I left that position, ended up being, a testing facility, as well as offering different programs, workshops for helping students to study math. But at that point in time, I decided to switch back to my technical roots when the Angel LMS administrator position became open in IT. Because I had that fulfillment in terms of giving back and helping students with their college career. but that technical part of me still needed, to be, I was missing that in my job as the COCO Math and Learning Lab coordinator. But still, as an LMS administrator, that was a position that was really interesting, because as a matter of basically supporting all 5 campuses at Eastern Florida State College, online, in class, supporting students, faculty, and staff. So there's where, it was a matter of, okay, how can I triage this? So going back to that problem solving, being a single person supporting thousands of individuals. Of course, I couldn't take every single call myself. So getting the help desk to triage some of those initial calls were very helpful. But even there still was that part of me that, needed a little bit more challenge. So at that point, I was thinking about, going back to school and getting my PhD at that point. But after I left, of course, Blackboard called and they're like, Denice, we love working with you. Would there be any way, shape, form, or fashion that you would take this implementation consultant position we have available in Indiana? And it was an offer I couldn't turn down. So that's where, I moved from Florida to Indianapolis, Indiana to work for Blackboard. The unfortunate thing there is that my position was eliminated. However, when one door closes, another door always opens. So of course, then I was considering, heading back to school. And at that point in time, I was like, I've been removed from engineering to the point where, getting a PhD in engineering, to say that it would be a feat would be an understatement. But math has always been something that I've either competed in or worked in or done. Because one of the things I noticed is that every single degree that I've tutored math in some way or fashion. So when I headed to IUPUI, originally I decided to major in math. With all the things that I've done, and even start, working as, before I actually entered into IUPUI, I worked as an adjunct math instructor at Ivy Tech Community College. And then after, I started as a graduate student at IUPUI, I ended up working as an adjunct instructor for IUPUI as well, and then tutoring for the School of Education. But the funniest part there was one semester where I was teaching both at IUPUI and Ivy Tech and tutoring at the same time, as well as being a student. So for those of you that are crazy enough to do anything like that, I say to you, find a way to stop. Don't drive yourself crazy like that. Just don't do it. Don't do it. But I'd even thrown in over one summer, I did a summer internship as a data analysis at T2 Systems. But, while I was there, majoring in math, when I was taking some of the classes, I still just didn't feel that connection. And I was thinking to myself, okay, really and truly, Denice, is this what you want to do? And I had to stop myself at that point and really say, is this the direction that you want to take, or is there something else that you want to do? And when I thought about, what's been a part of my life other than mathematics, that's where I had to go back to books, to reading, to researching. So that's where I made the decision to switch from majoring, getting a master's in math, to getting a master's in library and information systems. And that wasn't necessarily an easy journey as well, because I actually ended up moving from Indianapolis, Indiana to Tampa, Florida, the last year or the last couple of semesters of getting my master's in my MLIS. So definitely for those of you who may, still be pursuing your education and feel as if the weight of the world's against you, never give up on your dreams, still pursue it. There may be times you have to take time off. I ended up taking a semester off before resuming. And if you do need to do that, go ahead and do that, whatever works best for you, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, et cetera, et cetera. But another thing that helped me to decide to move on, to switch to MLIS, was the fact that when I worked at Blackboard, I bought a townhome and renovated the first floor not really renovated because it was brand new, but I actually had custom bookcases installed. So this is my library in Indianapolis. So it was another helpful tip for me to that, becoming a librarian definitely is in your best interest. Again, turning that passion into a career. And the sad thing is these aren't all of my books for this, because, at this point in time, I still had a storage unit in Phoenix that, had a lot of boxes of books, but I didn't want to scare you and have that picture in there as well. um, that's when, after or while I was still completing my MLIS, I did want to go ahead and try to find a position. And that's when I, started interviewing. And since I still had my technical background, at first when I was interviewing for both for LIS technical positions. And then, I still want to keep that engineering. So I was, also interviewing for STEM librarian positions. So one of the fun things that actually came available was the position at ZSR. And that was a whirlwind. That was my first foray in interviewing for an academic position, specifically one that's instructional. It turned out, I was used to my, 1 hour interviews in corporate America and for other positions. But this was my first almost 2-day interview process. I remember flying in on a Tuesday and flying out Wednesday evening, I believe it was. And it was a whirlwind because then that Friday, Dean Tim Pyatt was calling me to offer me a position, which I accepted. So then we had to get another move. It's all good. From Tampa, Florida to here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And being in the position, for about 1.5 years now, I still feel like a newbie, even though my calendar age, may not necessarily say so. Because this is the first time that I've held a position after obtaining a degree without actually doing some extensive work experience. So for those of you who are unsure, about being an engineering librarian or a STEM librarian, it's a matter of, having those transferable skills or experience. And I know just doing the job this first 1.5 years that I'll probably be learning every single day, every single month, every single year, because there are always new tools that are coming out in terms of databases or research tools. There's going to be a new bibliometric or altmetric to actually integrate or look at. But also one thing about position is that, you want to, it feeds that need in me in terms of that need to be creative, that need to continually learn, that need to not be stagnant, because I don't see myself doing the same thing day in and day out. That's either why I've always looked at growth opportunities in positions, or, looked at switching fields. It's that boredom that starts creeping in. And I can truly say that I definitely have not been bored in my 1.5 years being here. So with that said, just in terms of final thoughts, in terms of what I would say to you, just looking at my life's journey, the first thing I would say is everyone's journey is different. If you look in terms of at my life, my particular journey has had twists, turns, dips, forays, turnarounds, wraparounds. But that journey in and of itself actually teaches different things. And there have been moments where, not every experience has been positive and not every experience has been negative, but you learn from both of those experiences. And I definitely say find a passion and pursue it. Every degree I've earned and job I've had has taught me either what to do or what not to do. And a lot of those job opportunities have, brought me new experiences. Like living over in Germany, I actually was able to hit 11 different countries while I was over there. Writing the train over in Europe. Driving on the Autobahn is always an experience when you can drive as fast as you can and you realize that there are people out there that are driving even faster than what you're doing. Um, so definitely Vino Vito Vici, we came, we saw, we conquered. But give it your all. And as an avid bibliophile, I would always say read every single day. And I truly do read every single day. I probably average like a book a day. We'll talk about that later. But that's one of the things that's very, very key to what we do as librarians. We're not only finding research for individuals, but in finding that research for individuals, we do have to read. And one of the things I forgot to say along the way is I've always made decisions in terms of what classes to take or what workshops to pursue based on what I think that next step will be. So like when I was in middle school, I was taking computer classes and typing classes, knowing that I would need to type different reports in high school. When I was in high school, I actually took shorthand, a shorthand class, knowing that I would be have to take notes a lot faster since classes were more or less via lecture in college. But there are things I did along the way just in terms of helping me with an underlying skill set. So I'd say to you is always think about what's that skill set that you'll need. And then, what classes, what books, what videos, what's going to help you to actually learn that. Also realize you're not alone. I've had mentors every step of the way to guide me in my life's journey. My first mentor, Dr. Faison, he's supposedly retired, but not really. He's not retired. He's still doing a lot of work, civically natured. And I think he's probably either hitting his late 80s, early 90s at this point. And I've even had mentors here at ZSR, from Rebecca to Molly as my formal mentors, and then informal mentors, such as Sarah and my manager, Roz. So definitely know that there are people that are there to help you and do want to see you succeed. So don't feel as if you have to know the answer to every question. Definitely know that you can always reach out and ask. And one of the things that I love about being a librarian and working with librarians is everyone is there to help. There's always that servant mindset in the sense of, how can I help to solve another individual's problem? But that math part of me, just wants to say, some of the skill sets that help as for, help you when you're an engineering or STEM librarian is a little bit of creativity, because every problem won't be the same. Every research question definitely won't be the same. So you always have to look at how can you approach solving an individual's problem, finding a particular resource in a variety of different ways. Ingenuity, I see that as being different from creativity, because there's sometimes you're going to need to innovate. You're going to create something that hasn't necessarily been done before. Computer literacy is definitely key in terms of all the different databases that we interface with, all the different tools that we use along our librarian journey, and grit, because there's sometimes when you're trying to find that singular resource and it doesn't look like it's anywhere to be found. It's just a matter of looking at it in a different place and continue to pursue, changing up your search string, throwing in some truncation, wildcard character, phrase searching, whatever you need to do in order to actually get the job done. And then being a bibliophile, having that passion, that love for reading. Those are some of the key characteristics that I think make it in terms of being an engineering librarian. So definitely, I would encourage each of you, that's the end of my formal presentation. And I've left my contact details, both my phone number and my email address, if you ever want to reach out or if you have any questions. But since, as usual, I'm a little bit fast on time, going through this and developing the presentation in of itself, some of the funniest things that I actually realized about the experience when I started thinking about it, I was like, I have tutored every single time I have earned a degree. So when I was at Georgia Tech, I tutored for the OMED, the Office of Minority Educational Development. I tutored math and then, if need be, filled in other areas. When I was at Scottsdale Culinary Institute, I tutored math for the Escoffier Honor Society. You would think, yes, cooking does have math in it in terms of recipe conversions and other things. And then when I was at IUPUI, I tutored math also for the School of Education. And then in terms of cooking, I've always, had that love of cooking. And that's been the hardest part being in my apartment now. A galley kitchen just doesn't really fit my cooking needs. But when I was at Georgia Tech, I had different cooking themes each semester. So like there was one time there was like the soup things, soup and sandwiches. The only failure there was the French onion soup. The cheese didn't actually congeal very well. Of course, being in culinary school, yeah, you're cooking every day. And then at IUPUI, I was vegan for about 9 months. So just finding different recipes there. And I really loved and enjoyed, yeah, jams and jellies became my thing. But enough, yeah, those are just themes that I saw if we had time, which we do. But thank you for the opportunity, for sharing my life story with me. And we can open it up to questions and answers.